Now what I want to talk about is a pretty big subject: discrimination and sexual harassment. Discrimination is like a gas leak. It smells, but it's hard to find it. Why? Because it's in the minds of all kinds of different people and not often readily presented. It therefore ultimately depends on the will of each person to choose for themselves to remove the biases that they have in their character, and that accomplishing that goal is a positive thing, certainly for the society they live in and for the corporate culture that they're in. So when we talk about discrimination, I'm automatically understanding that the company has made an effort to remove any structural sources of discrimination that may exist. So whatever they may be, those things are removed. The discrimination that is latent within a person, that's what we're going to be talking about in terms of your moral or ethical behavior. So again, I want to remind you that the role of an ethical manager is to create an environment that nourishes and nurtures the employees that you have, at least in what we're talking about here. If that environment is distorted because of discrimination, the rest of the employees are not fools. They will see that one person is being handled differently than another person. They will conclude the reasoning, and automatically that poisons the atmosphere. It's not that you don't have to say it in order for it to be there. And that's why I said it's like a gas leak. Hard to find, but it smells. So it's very important, if you understand regarding discrimination, that your goal is to create an environment in the company that nurtures and nourishes all the people. Even though you may feel that you have certain biases, you have to consciously remove them from your decision making. What you do at home is entirely up to you. Equal, therefore, does not mean identical, because different people have different skills. So when you are creating this corporate culture and you're trying to be sure that everyone gets a fair shake at what's required, you can't lose sight of the fact that there are requirements for the particular job. For example, if you need to be at a knowledge level of, let's say, I don't know, a PhD, in order to teach at a particular level, then if the person is not a PhD, it doesn't make sense to ask them to teach in terms of creating equality at a level that is beyond their capacity. Because we will accomplish one of several things. One, that person will be unable to do the job and they'll lose their job. Whereas if you had allowed them to progress at a normal pace, they might have been able to do that job, but in 2 or 3 or 5 years from now. Second of all, you may reduce the performance of that particular job because you put a person in it that isn't qualified to do the job. So discrimination, or the elimination of discrimination, does not mean that we are trying to create equality of some kind of number, but that we are trying to create equality of opportunity. That's what has to be nurtured, and that's what has to be nourished. And now, in the workplace, in order for jobs to get done, there have got to be job descriptions, and there have to be what are called, in legal terms, bona fide job occupational requirements. So, for example, you cannot be a fireman if you are disabled in some way and cannot climb a ladder, only because the job may require you to climb a ladder. So the disability creates that barrier to that particular job for you. Now that doesn't mean you can't work in the fire department. You may have to take another function, but to ask you to climb the ladder would be inappropriate and would put you and jeopardize your physical health. So we have to understand that this concept of a bona fide occupational requirement is necessary. So there's two interesting cases that we can talk about. One is Delta Airlines. They merged with Pan Am, and when they merged with Pan Am, they created a rule that any flight attendant over a weight of 153 pounds could no longer work for the company. And so they terminated a number of flight attendants, which actually in many ways allowed them to consolidate the purchase of Pan Am in terms of people. The employees that were terminated felt that this was discrimination according to their weight, and that it was illegal and against the law. And so they petitioned the court, and the court agreed to hear their case, and they presented their case. And when Delta Airlines stood up to make its case, it said quite simply that what the plaintiffs had forgotten to mention is that the job of the flight attendant is not to give out sandwiches and coffee. That's what most people experience when they go on the plane. But that is a secondary part of their main job that they're on the plane for. And if you think about it, that's entirely possible. You could certainly have a self-serve snack center at the back of each plane. Delta Airlines clearly pointed out, and it was consistent with other airlines, that the purpose of flight attendants was to act to protect the health and the safety of the passengers in the event of a plane crashing, losing altitude, or any other difficulty that might be encountered. That was their main job. And that people who weighed beyond this 153 pounds could not properly exercise those functions. And that was their argument. And the court agreed that the requirement to be able to safely do the job was more significant than the discrepancy between one weight and another. So that was Delta Airlines, and the employees lost the case. Similarly, dealing with a bona fide job description, I'm sure many of you have heard of Hooters. It's a restaurant, and all the servers that work in Hooters seem to look a very particular way. There's not a lot of diversity in terms of the look. There's a lot of diversity in terms of ethnic background, but not a lot of diversity in terms of the look. So some of the people who applied for the job that were rejected because they didn't have the look that Hooters wanted, filed a class action lawsuit against Hooters for discrimination based on their appearance. Hooters came to court and explained that they were no different than the Dallas Cowboys We have cheerleaders that only look one particular way because their job is to entertain the football fans in between plays, and this was the entertainment. Part of the entertainment was the look. Or the Radio City Rockettes, it's a dance group, who get up and they do a show. And again, their job was to entertain and to have a certain specific look. And that was their reason. For similarly with their restaurant, people who came to the restaurant were looking for a certain entertainment value from the servers, that they had a particular look, and when they brought them the food to the table, that was the deal. And then that was the defense, and the plaintiff, the lawyers for the plaintiff said, well, let's take a look at the website. I mean, we hear that Hooters is telling us that they're creating entertainment and it's a sports bar and people are coming for this particular look on the young women. But let's take a look at what their website says. Their website says that they're a family restaurant. Family? In a family, all kinds of looks are acceptable. You can have grandma, you can have grandpa, you can have, beautiful children, ugly children. Everything is acceptable in a family. And they define themselves with their own words as a family restaurant. And so in that case, Hooters lost the court battle and had to pay a settlement to all the servers that had not been hired, and promptly changed their website to identify themselves as an entertainment sports bar. And then they could have the look and that they desired. So you can see that discrimination is a very tenuous subject. And as managers, we have to recognize that a sense of discrimination in a workplace, although it's not easily detectable, diminishes the environment and the culture that brings the most out of people. We have to be willing to create a sense of diversity and a sense of inclusiveness in our company cultures so that all members are valued, and therefore even the ones that are not members of some smaller group still feel good because they're being inclusive of these people as well. So I think that's a pretty important thing to know regarding discrimination. Now I want to switch and talk about sexual harassment. Oh, just one last note on discrimination. Doing no harm is probably the best philosophical outlook that you can use in order of accomplishing this goal. So now, sexual harassment is a very difficult subject for me to talk about because it's very difficult to define what sexual harassment means. If I would ask each one of you what you think it means, I'd probably get a different answer from everyone. For example, if I give you a compliment, is that considered sexual harassment? Male, female? What if I male, male? Is that considered sexual harassment? What if I give you a hug after a job well done? What if I give you a kiss on the cheek after a job well done? Is that considered sexual harassment? What if I don't say anything to you, but I put a picture up on the wall of the, Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition, calendar of the swimsuit of the month? Is that considered sexual harassment? What if I ask you out for a date? Is that sexual harassment? What if I send you very explicit emails? Is that sexual harassment? You can see that as I'm giving you these different examples, some of you are saying yes, absolutely. Others are saying, well, no, not yet. Maybe, maybe it would be, but not at that point. So that difficulty makes it enormously difficult to manage. So again, as with any of these subjects, this needs to be dealt with, and it needs to be discussed amongst the employees so that everybody has input and comes up with a clear policy on what is going to be defined as sexual harassment. Essentially, like the baseline of sexual harassment is, it's the use of power. I am your boss, or I am bigger than you, or I have authority over you. And I use that authority, size, or relationship in order to require favors from you. Now, that's one thing. The other thing that defines sexual harassment, I think that's universally agreed, is that the acquiescence of those favors is a part of your progress in this job. In other words, if you do what I say, you'll get ahead. If you don't do what I say, you're not moving anywhere in this job, and I may even get you fired. And it doesn't always have to be strictly in the relationships I mentioned, because it also could be even your peers that make fun of you or call you names or make lewd comments or taunt you. So there are many different levels of this. The one thing that seems to come out of all these things that we're talking about is that sexual harassment is defined by the person who's experiencing it. And therefore there has to be, built into the culture of the company, a sense of accommodating that expression from the employees. And that even though you may have a policy that mandates certain consequences for sexual harassment, even if the behaviors don't necessarily fit into those conditions, there has to be a facility for listening to them and hearing them from the employee. That has to be included. The fact that companies tend to dismiss this issue creates a powder keg of problems. First of all, the employee that feels that they haven't been heard and goes back to work, and the employee who did the harassment is of course advised and told never to repeat it, and it never happens again. You still have the employee who feels victimized, that is trying to do their job, but ultimately you're going to find that their psychology has been significantly damaged. So there has to be a remedial process that is included in the policies of sexual harassment that allows for something to change in the relationship between those two people that creates a healing for both of them and facilitates especially a healing for the person who feels that they've been victimized. So this is probably one of the toughest areas for an HR department or a manager to deal with, because it's so fluid. I'll give you a short little story that will show you how difficult it is. One of the students wrote me this story that they worked in a company where the manager was very successful. They accounted for a huge chunk of the sales, and I guess it must have been some kind of sales-oriented company. And that the manager was particularly interested in this one particular person, and got to the point of sending some pretty explicit text messages, and was confronted by the employee who said, stop it already, forget it. Didn't stop. Went to the boss. I mean, I'm reducing the story here, and they asked for evidence. Of course, they had all the text messages, showed that what the person had done, and now here was the issue that the company faced. This person who harassed the other person was the key to the success and sales of that division. What do we do with this person? The one who was victimized was just one of the clerks, literally unimportant. The tendency would be to, fire the one and warn the other one to stop doing it. And that way the problem would be eliminated. And you might think, oh, that seems to make sense. We keep the person who's making all the revenue, and we fire the person who unfortunately they decided to pick on. But that's not being an ethical manager. Now, similarly, you might think, oh, never mind, let's fire the salesperson, and that'll validate the clerk that's been harassed. But that doesn't make sense either, because you're losing one of your best people, and it doesn't correct anything. An ethical manager is concerned with everything that's going on for everybody. So whether it's the victim or whether it's the harasser, both people are of interest to the manager. Now, clearly, if the person who is harassing is repeatedly doing it, something is going on. And the manager recognized that. Once you're told once or twice to leave the person alone and you don't do it by the person, there's something wrong, especially in this society, the way things are. So there's a bigger problem with this particular salesperson that probably has to be dealt with. Similarly, the person who was victimized, you can't just blow them off, because every other employee is going to see what's happening here, and they're going to believe that other than this one important salesperson, everybody else is disposable. So you're going to instantly destroy the culture of your company in a matter of minutes. And the trust and the loyalty of people is not easy to recover. So what the HR department did in this case was exactly what you should do as an ethical manager. For the person who harassed the employee, they were given a 3-week leave of absence, and they were enrolled in with a psychologist to discuss the issues leading up to this type of behavior and hopefully find a way to remediate it. And they had to participate in the counseling, because clearly something was going wrong, either in their home or somewhere. The bottom line is they gave help and nurturing to the harasser. Similarly, the person who was harassed was given counseling and helped in any way that was necessary to kind of get them over that feeling of being sort of like, victimized. And it helped. So in this case, both of the employees were dealt with in a way that specifically addressed their concerns. And that is the critical component of an ethical manager. You are treating your employees as if they are a partner in your business, and that's what makes you effective. So I think I'll leave it there, and thank you.